Hello, people. Thanks for joining me. I'm Scott, and I've got this beautiful, brand spanking new Tokai. It's only been in the country for a couple of days. They FedExed it overnight to my customer, and he thought it felt a little weird and wanted me to check it out. He only has a couple more days left before he can return it, so let's give it a look. Tokai ES220. Guarantee. It's a really nice job of like a 60s Gibson. I'd say it's almost a clone. It does not have fretboard nibs like a Gibson would. When he plugged it in to try it out, he said something felt weird. Maybe the frets were too low or something. Maybe the string spacing. And you can see they did a great job of copying the Gibson design here with the truss rod and the cutout. It does look like something was done after the finish was sprayed on. There's some of the finish that's chipped away here. It's down to bare wood down under the truss rod nut, and then you can see all these like 80 grit sandpaper scratches right here on this area. That could be touched up, but I'm gonna tell a customer he should send a picture of this. I'll take a picture and send it to him, and he can send it back to the dealer and ask for a discount, because that does not look good. So what we'll be doing today is changing the strings, tightening the truss rod, straightening out the neck a little bit, and replacing this nut. When he said the string spacing felt weird, he was right, because there's only 32.7 millimeters spacing here between the low E's. He has 9 through 42 strings, and we're going to go to 10 through 46. We have a narrow nut, 41 millimeters. That is like a late 60s Gibson. Very skinny. But the problem is they spaced they put the strings in from the edge well over 1/8 of an inch. Actually, they got 5/32 from the edge of the fretboard to the edge of the outside of the string. It's more than 1/8 of an inch, which just really makes everything crammed. So I'm gonna make a new bone nut, and I think based on what I felt when I tried to turn this truss rod earlier, I'm gonna have to take the nut out, maybe clamp the neck. Won't have to heat press it or anything, but I'm gonna clamp it into a back bow and lubricate that nut and tighten it real good. Try to get a little bit more, make it easier, and just help the truss rod out a little bit here. I don't know if it's made with nitro or if it's a poly finish. I guess we'll tell when we start looking at that truss rod cavity there. But the thing I'll say about the frets is that my customer shouldn't have a problem with the frets. This does kind of look like a poly finish. But yeah, he shouldn't have a problem with these frets, because I measured them. They're 103 thousandths wide and 45 thousandths tall. And that's the exact same as his 2023 1957 Gibson Les Paul Custom Black Beauty. Actually, I showed that in a few videos ago. He had the brand new one, and that's the exact same size of those frets. I had to get the relief right earlier, so I was tightening this thing just so I could play it and hear how the pickup sounded, and I had to tighten that an abnormal amount. It was so tight. I didn't like that. Now if I take acetone on a Q-tip here, I should be able to identify whether this is poly or lacquer. If this were lacquer, some of that black paint from the edges, even if some of the clear was left on there still, some of it would end up on this Q-tip. I'm not really seeing that happen. So I think it's poly. If you're ever working on an old guitar and the truss rod nut doesn't seem to be doing its job as good as it should, here's a trick. I take a diamond file with a little bit of this Dynaglide for tool and surface, all metals. And usually on an older guitar, the bottom of the truss rod nut, the hex nut, is just mutilated. It's not flat. It's got all sorts of crap on it. And you do that, and it not only completely smooths it 100%, but it kind of deburrs it and it makes it function so much better. You can almost rescue a guitar's neck 5 out of 10 times just by doing this. And another thing I'll show you. You got to do this, flatten it out, and then you lubricate it. I'm going to lubricate it with the lubricant from D'Addario. Is pretty much Vaseline. Yep. A little Vaseline on the nut. Tighten that baby down and see what happens. I should actually do that touch-up first before I put it back on. This is a little bit of shellac with a little bit of India ink and a little bit of Mixol black. It's pretty diluted. It's going to take a couple coats. Okay, I added a little bit more of the Mixol pigment. To my cup. Another thing that's very Gibson-esque about this guitar is the small studs, the Imperial studs. You usually get those big fat 1/4-inch ones with a standard screwdriver slot through them on these import guitars made in China. But this is USA stuff. First thing I do when I'm removing a nut is I come in with a brand new, fresh X-Acto blade and I score here just to make sure that the poly finish or whatever finish isn't overlapping. And I can really feel that this nut is just fit in there perfectly. There's no lacquer sprayed over top of it or clear finish of any sort. Color coat, nothing. At Gibson they spray the color and the clear over top of the nut. So okay, I'm going to do that to both sides of the nut. Well, that was a trip. By the time I scored around both sides, the nut came right out. It wasn't not glued in. It was just a perfect fit. It was just barely, I don't know how it was set in there, but I wanted to talk about something here. Brand new guitar, I just had it in that vise right there. Now, typically it's not a good idea to take a brand new guitar with no scratches on it and crank it down into a vise. That's why I really enjoy having this String Tech workstation here. When I want to pamper a guitar, I just set it on here. There's nothing on here that'll scratch a guitar. It's lined with leather, and you know, unless you get a little fret dust down here on this neck call, you got to keep that clean because you can scratch up the back of a neck real quick with fret particles on here. Well, one of my contemporaries just got this Proppers guitar workstation, and he put a guy's brand new guitar in it from a boutique builder, and he had it sitting in here, and he had it clamped down right here on the tail block with this urethane stuff. And he had it cranked down, and when he took the guitar out of it the next day, it damaged all the finish down in here. And it's probably the builder's fault for using the soft material, but you got to be careful with priceless instruments or mint condition instruments. There are a lot of metal parts on here, and if it's not secure in here, it could easily fall, and if it hits any part of this, you're doomed. At least you're scratched. So I think this total vise is pretty safe just for clamping down a neck real quick, doing what I did with that nut. Other than that, I don't want to put this guitar in any clamps today, or vices. So this original nut is a beauty. It's 4.2 millimeters, 4.3. I've got one here. It's like 4.5, 4.6. So it's going to be perfect. I'm just going to trace the outline of the old nut right onto this new blank. Actually, notice this nut's a little weird right here. There's the scooped out area in it. So it's only good starting right about here. So I'm going to retrace that. Get my big thumb out of the way. It's a perfect shaped nut. Just need to change the string spacing a little bit. Damn it. Alright. Take her down. I'll be able to get two nuts out of this. We'll just kind of rough in another. I'm going to rough in two nuts.
First, I cut the nut bone on the bandsaw.
You won't be able to see it here, but what I've got now in the garage is a pretty nice little dust collection system for these three machines. I got the bandsaw, the drill press disc sander from String Tech, and then I have the Australian multi-tool attachment on my bench grinder. There's the bench grinder, and I also have these blast gates connected to each dust collector, and they're all connected to one shop vac. But this jet grinder is also attached to a momentary foot switch. That's what you see me kind of doing. I'll just turn it on for a second, get it up to about 2,000 RPMs, and then I'll release and let it idle. The drill press is on another foot switch. It's on the type of foot switch where you just press it on and it stays on until you press it again, and then it turns itself off. And I have the drill press and the both shop vacs on those foot switches. Basically, I'm lazy. I don't like to bend over to keep turning things on and off. But check this out. Turn it backwards till the threads click together, and then turn it forwards. Goes in easy every time. And that's a 5/16 ratchet and socket. Now I'm going to dial in the exact thickness of the nut with some 120 grit on a MDF block. Vacuum that up. And it fits just right. A nice tight fit. The top is still a little wonky, but we'll get there. Now I'm going to measure and mark the outside string edges. We're going to go a little less than 5/32. We're going to go like 3/32 this time. Because remember, I have a very narrow nut width, so I want to push the envelope a little bit. I want to open up those first slots on the outer edges with my X-Acto saw. And then I want to use the Stumex string spacing rule. Line up the outside string edges with the one that corresponds, and then that tells me exactly where to put the strings in between. Saw those all out with the razor saw, get them started, and then we'll start with a 10/1000ths of an inch nut file. And the StewMac nut files have radiused bottoms to them, so they don't have a square bottom. They won't leave a square shaped on the bottom of each string slot like this X-Acto saw does. The X-Acto saw just gets you started. Here's the 10/1000ths of an inch nut file. This is the Music Nomad diamond file. These cut real fast, and you can see I work like a crazed lunatic when I get things going with these nuts and saddles. I just work really, really fast, and it's because I have this kind of vision in my head of where things are going with it. It's not like that I really need to look at what I'm doing very much. I just have a feel for it nowadays. I could almost do this blindfolded, although I wouldn't know which file I just grabbed. So what am I talking about? I couldn't do this blindfolded. But the point is, I don't have to get my face within 1 inch of what I'm doing to see what's going on. I kind of have a vision of what's going on. And that's what's going on. I have some nice, even string slots in my nut. I'm going to vacuum that up. This shop vacs on a wall switch. And I'm checking my string spacing, and I'm seeing that the A could go a little bit towards the bass side. The A is a little too close to the D. So I can fudge it. I can coerce it a little bit by angling the file towards the E string. And after I fudge it just a skosh, it's perfect. Nuts on, string slots. Looking good. And you can see here how much wider my string spacing is now. And I tell you, with guitars, even an eyelash seems like a complete time zone of difference, because it's such a feel thing. Okay, right now I'm shaping the top of the nut to the 14-degree angle to match the headstock of a Gibson Tokai. And then I also want to round over the back edge of the nut to more of a spherical shape, kind of, so it's not square on the back side. Okay, so all the strings are in, and I can move it side to side to get it where it looks right. If anything here, I want the bass string, the E, low E, to be a little closer to the edge than the high E, because when you're doing leads, the high E tends to roll off the edge if you're playing hard. The bass strings don't tend to roll off the edge as bad as the treble string. So now I know where I want to bring this nut shape right down to that line, and I'm cutting it a little too close for comfort on the treble side there. Anyways, off to the Performax disc sander. If you guys don't have one of these yet, go on Menards.com and get you one of these. They're only $60. Okay, now you can see how the low E nut slot has a U shape to it. That means I've still got a little extra bone on top that I can remove. I want more of a semicircle. I don't want a U-shaped slot at this point along, at this stage of my progress. So here we go, taking off a little bit off the top. And we're going to make sure that each nut slot has a semicircle shape. A slight U shape is okay. We just don't want them super deep by the time we're done, because they could bind up if he throws a set of 10s on here or something. I thought he gave me a set of 10s, but they're actually 9 through 46. But if he does accidentally put 10s on there, they'll bind up real bad if those slots are too deep. I'll sand the nut with 400 and 600 grit. And then I'll work my way through all 7 or 8 of these micro mesh pads till it's all nice and shiny. Shiny and clean, like a virgin. Shiny and new. I put a small bead of the Tight Bond Original on the edge of the rosewood, and I slop a little bit down on the bottom. Now, I place the strings back over, and I bring them up to 3/4 of tension. Whatever, I just put a little bit of tension on the strings, that way while the glue cures, you know. Set it aside for a couple hours. Let that glue cure, and then we'll finish the job. All right, here we are. We've made it to second base. What I've done is I've got it tuned up with the final gauge of strings, which happens to be 9 through 46. I've got the truss rod adjusted so that the neck has the relief I want, and I've got the bridge adjusted where the string action at the 12th fret is where I want it. And if there's anything you take away from this video, hopefully it's this final step where I aim to get to like round third base with this. I'm not trying to, you know, get to home plate with the intonation here, because it's just never going to be perfect. So I don't set my expectations too high. But this is the final step, and this is where I really tune it in. I've got the each string. I've got if I press it down at the 3rd fret, so it's pressing on the nut and the 2nd fret. I want an eyelash gap right here between the bottom of the string and the top of the 1st fret. And that's where I'm at with each string. Now I'll show you how I dial it in. It's a little bit by eyeballing it, it's a little bit by ear, and it's a little bit by machine. Okay, so here's the next and final step. So I get the tuner to where it's neutral at 0 cents. Open string at the nut. Then I fret it at the 12th fret. Get my intonation correct at the bridge. I adjust it if I need to. If I'm within 1 or 2 cents, that's fine. Then I fret it at the 1st fret, and it should be a little sharp. Indeed it is, 8 or 9 cents sharp. And that's because the nut is too high, the nut slot. We're going to bring that down till it's perfectly in tune on the tuner. So when I hold it down here at the 3rd fret, it's pressing on the 2nd fret, it's pressing on the nut, and there's a little gap right here, the bottom of the string to the top of the fret, but it's too much of a gap. We need to bring this nut slot down so that the note doesn't fret sharp anymore at the 1st fret. And when I get it there, I'll know it's dialed in right where it needs to be. Okay, now this A string is a 35 thousandths of an inch thick string. So I've got my 35 thousandths nut file, and I'm gonna do like 8 swipes. And I'm gonna hit the sides a little bit because this file is 1/1000th of an inch more narrow than it should be. So you want to go with the plane of the string and then slightly downward towards the back edge. Not much though. And I'll keep checking. I'll put it back in the slot. I'll string it up. Tune it up and check the tuner. Alright, I filed it. Sometimes I need to go through that process more than once to get it acceptable. 12th fret, the nut, open string, 12th fret. It's a little flat at the 12th fret. My intonation's off at the bridge a little bit. I can adjust the saddle. But let's take the 1st fret reading and see that if we're within 2 cents, that's third bass for me. I don't want to file a slot too low, because once you file it too low, you got to start over. So I'd rather be within, I'd like to give myself a little wiggle room. And this is it. So I'll go through this process with each string, and then we'll be ready to wrap this job up. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you hanging around and subscribing especially. And I hope you have a good one. We'll catch you later.